two-time Playboy cover girl, WWE Hall of Fame class of 2019. Ladies, gentlemen, my non-binary friends, it is I, Josh Robinson, here for Love Wrestling, and today it's the legacy of Torrie Wilson. Torrie Wilson's wrestling career started in WCW, World Championship Wrestling, in 1999. After going backstage, she was asked to walk out to the ring with Scott Steiner. It was also kind of revealed that she was brought in by the NWO to seduce David Flair into turning against her father Ric Flair. Yeah, really. Of course, she kind of sparingly was used in WCW, meeting all different kinds of people, being used in different kinds of things on Nitro and throughout pay-per-views. But Torrie kind of became a staple of WCW in the latter part in 1999 and 2000, until of course its demise in 2001. Of course, Torrie Wilson met her husband, Billy Kidman, in WCW in the latter part of the late 90s. Now, she would be kind of wrestle, kind of not, it was weird. Torrie Wilson was never really considered a wrestler, especially in WCW, but she was used in mixed tag matches and working with the likes of Medusa, and, it's interesting. She actually worked at September's Fall Brawl in 2000 in a mixed tag team match with a scaffolding erected above the ring. That's right, Torrie Wilson has wrestled in a scaffold match and you haven't. But of course, Torrie Wilson was released from WCW in December of 2000. And then it all I know I'm kind of ushering through WCW here, but Torrie really didn't do a hell of a lot, but not nothing in WCW. But she certainly was known for being one of the women in WCW in a place that didn't really have a women's division. They kind of used different things to get more eyes on the male talent using women in WCW. But she did wrestle in WCW. Torrie Wilson would make her WWE debut on June 28, 2001 on an episode of SmackDown, of course, as part of the Alliance during the Invasion angle in 2001. Now, here's going to be a sentence that everyone's going to take out of context. In her first storyline with the company, she of course portrayed Vince McMahon's latest affair. Do with that what you will. She regularly teamed with fellow WCW performer and Legacy of alumni Stacy Keibler. The duo would make their wrestling debuts in WWE in a bra and panties match against Lita and Trish Stratus at the Invasion pay-per-view in 2001. Stratus and Lita would of course win by stripping Keibler and Wilson down to their yellow and white bikinis. It was a very different time in wrestling. And of course, Torrie Wilson's second match in WWE, which you may or may not know, was the following night on Raw, where Wilson actually beat Trish Stratus in a paddle on a pole match. 100% that is what happened. I'm not making this up. Now, despite her relatively lack of inexperience in the ring, Wilson alongside Keibler, Ivory, regularly feuded with the WWF Divas, interfering in matches and kind of being they were the women of the Alliance, Stacy Keibler and Torrie Wilson, along with others, but they were, I think when you think of the Alliance, those are the two women that kind of came across with WCW and were kind of most associated with WCW at the time. Now, while Torrie Wilson wasn't a WWE Women's Champion in her career, she did wrestle for the Women's Championship on a multiple number of occasions against the likes of Molly Holly, Victoria, and Trish Stratus. Now, I think when we think of Torrie Wilson in the early 2000s, I think there's only one feud that we really need to dive into, and that was, of course, started in September of 2002 with Dawn Marie. Now, I think we all know where this is going, but Dawn Marie would start a relationship with Torrie Wilson's real-life father, Al Wilson. On October 17th episode of SmackDown, Wilson teamed up with the Rikishi in a losing effort to the team of Dawn and Matt Hardy. Now, of course, I don't know if you guys are aware of what I'm about to say or whether it's going to mean much in the context of things, but I know it was a very interesting storyline. A lot happened in that storyline, but SmackDown didn't have a women's championship. The brand split was kind of establishing itself, and the women's division was really accustomed to Raw. It was where it was. The women's championship was there. We associate the women's title with the likes of Trish Stratus, Lita, Molly Holly, people like that. Now, while on the SmackDown side of things, there wasn't women wrestling every week on SmackDown. However, there was women wrestling on pay-per-views because of Torrie Wilson and Dawn Marie. They had a match at No Mercy. Of course, they would have a match at the Royal Rumble in 2003. This feud was wild. Now, it's not for everybody, and it's kind of I'll just keep using the word interesting side of wrestling. Now, personally, I love this kind of stuff. It's silly, it's outlandish, it's what pro wrestling is to me, but of course, there was multiple things that would happen. Now, Dawn Marie would get engaged to Torrie Wilson's father, Al. This is where it gets interesting. She actually told Torrie Wilson that she would break it off with her dad if she spent a night in a hotel room with her. Of course, that was revealed by Dawn Marie that was later a lie. Now, there was footage of this that was shown at Armageddon, again, on pay-per-view. And of course, the feud continued into 2003 when Dawn and Al Wilson, I should say, got married on the January 2nd episode of SmackDown in their underwear. Now, 1 week later, Al, then, in a storyline, actually suffered a heart attack during intense experiences in the bedroom with Dawn Marie, causing him to have a heart attack. He died in storyline in 2002. Now, Wilson then challenged Dawn Marie to the first ever, and I believe only in WWE history, stepmother versus stepdaughter match. Royal Rumble 2003, again, as a co-branded pay-per-view. They were the only two women, I believe, that were wrestling on that card. Now, you can correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but I believe this was the only women's match at Royal Rumble 2003. Now, Torrie Wilson would eventually win this match and win this feud. Of course, they battled in a funeral of Al Wilson, and it was, again, a very wild storyline. But probably Torrie Wilson's most recognizable storyline in her WWE or even WCW career. Torrie Wilson would make kind of history here with WWE when she was the cover of the Playboy magazine. Now, again, we talked about the Divas time and what it was in that time, and of course that's not happening anymore, but Torrie Wilson was a Playboy cover girl, not once but twice, along with Sable. Now, Torrie Wilson would enter some feuds in 2003 because of the Playboy magazine. I think most notably, Wilson was wrestling with Sable, and she was with Sable at WrestleMania. I mean, Torrie Wilson's wrestled at WrestleMania 20. She had some kind of a pillow fight thing that happened. Now, Torrie Wilson was kind of associated with SmackDown throughout most of her career, while we had the likes of Trish and Lita, and even her counterpart in Stacy Keibler on Raw. Torrie Wilson was holding down the deck on the Blue brand. She was the female face of SmackDown in a lot of ways. There wasn't a lot of women on SmackDown, but I mean, when you think of SmackDown in the early 2000s, you think of the SmackDown 6 and the wrestling that they were doing. Torrie Wilson was also a part of SmackDown and was making SmackDown the A show. A lot of people say that SmackDown was the flag bearer, SmackDown was the show to watch. It was kind of the wrestling show, and Torrie Wilson was on that wrestling show. Now, when we think of Torrie Wilson in the early 2000s, of course, it's nice to mention that she managed a lot of talent in her time. I think in the early 2000s on SmackDown, we a lot remember, of course, being with a heel Tajiri. She would dress up in all kinds of different kimonos and all different kinds of things during the early 2000s. You know, the early 2000s was a wild time, especially in wrestling. But she would be associated with Tajiri. She would be associated with people like that. She even got to work with the likes of Kurt Angle in the times, and Rey Mysterio, Rob Van Dam. She was a part of a lot of different things in her time on SmackDown. She would eventually move to Raw in 2005, and of course, we would get Vince's Devils. Candice Michelle, Torrie Wilson, and Victoria. It was a very sexualized female faction in the latter part of 2005, and it was one of the last things that Torrie Wilson would do in WWE. Now, Torrie Wilson would kind of feud with different women on Raw and be a part of Vince's Devils and kind of eventually usher out. Now, of course, Raw wasn't her home for very long because she would move to WWE's ECW brand in 2006. Of course, you know, she would have this on-screen relationship with Carlito back on Raw and do different things. I mean, I never associate Torrie Wilson with Raw, but she did do a lot of stuff on Raw with the Vince's Devils and then the relationship with Carlito. Of course, she was always associated as kind of the girl next door. She was the babyface. She was a heel for a little bit, but she was the babyface girl. She was the girl next door. often aligning herself with heels on television in on-screen relationships, but that's neither here nor there. I do not judge. Torrie Wilson would move back to SmackDown after her couple of years on Raw, and of course would eventually end her career on SmackDown, where it all kind of began for her, or whether she kind of peaked on SmackDown in that time. She was released from her WWE contract and subsequently required in 2008. A great time for Torrie Wilson. A lot of people don't really look at Torrie as a wrestler, and that's fine. She was used for other things, but she developed a lot in her wrestling career. She always tried really, really hard, and I think she's always going to be a staple of the Ruthless Aggression era, especially when it comes to the Blue brand. Torrie Wilson would of course return a few little times throughout after her retirement. In 2009 at WrestleMania 25, she competed in the 25 Diva Royal Rumble. I don't think it's called a Royal Rumble, I think it's called a Battle Royal, to crown Miss WrestleMania. She wouldn't appear again in WWE until the January 22nd, 2018 episode of Raw on the 25th anniversary. Of course, was honoured as being one of the greatest female superstars in the history of WWE. She would return to the ring later that month in 2018, a part of the first ever Women's Royal Rumble match, and kick some damn ass while at it. She would make different appearances throughout WWE at Evolution in a Battle Royal, and a couple more Royal Rumbles to add in there. And of course, on March 4th, 2019, it was announced that Torrie Wilson would be inducted into the WWE class of 2019 Hall of Fame. She was of course inducted by her best friend, Stacy Keibler. Man, it's easy for me to say, isn't it? There was a lot of controversy surrounding her Hall of Fame induction, of whether she deserved it or anything like that. We are not here to say whether she deserved it or not. What we are here to do is recognize a great career of one of the most marketable women in WWE history, and a true Blue brand flag bearer. She represented SmackDown well. Torrie Wilson is one of the greats in WWE history. That's going to do it for this week's episode of The Legacy Of. Of course, let me know what you think about the show and Torrie Wilson in the comments below. You can follow me pretty much across the board at JoshRobinson_00. Follow Love Wrestling at Love Wrestling CA. I think pretty much everywhere now too. And of course, we'll be back next week for more The Legacy Of as Season 4 rolls on. And of course, leave a like, leave a share, leave a subscribe, all that kind of good stuff. Get that we're bumping up numbers here on Love Wrestling, so give us all some love. We do great work pretty much everywhere. There's something for everyone here on Love Wrestling. I'll be back next week, folks. It's been a pleasure. Peace out.